Have you ever wondered how an entire subcontinent, home to one of the world's most ancient civilizations, can completely reinvent itself in just 500 years? It's an incredible story. We're talking about the golden age of a magnificent empire, a chaotic collapse that opened the door to a new global power, and then the amazing rebirth of a nation. This is the story of modern India.
So, to really get a grip on this massive journey, we're going to look at it in three major acts. We'll kick things off around the 1500s with the rise of the incredible Mughal Empire. Then we jump to the mid-1700s, where we see a huge shift with the start of British influence. And finally, we land in 1947 with the birth of the independent India we know today. Think of this as our roadmap. All right, let's start our story with a real powerhouse of its time, the Mughal Empire. Now, when you hear empire, you might just think of conquerors, but the Mughals were so much more than that. This was a thriving center for art, architecture, and a really advanced government that was, frankly, admired around the world. So, where did it all begin? Well, the starting gun really fired in 1526. At a battle called Panipat, a leader named Babur defeated the ruler of Delhi. And that single victory, right there, laid the groundwork for a dynasty that would go on to shape the subcontinent for hundreds of years. A huge part of the empire's strength was this incredible string of impressive rulers. You had Akbar the Great, who was known for his brilliant administrative skills and, really unusually for the time, his religious tolerance. After him, you had patrons of the arts like Jahangir and Shah Jahan, who brought stability and, of course, gave us masterpieces like the Taj Mahal. And finally, there was Aurangzeb, who expanded the empire to its absolute biggest, controlling almost the entire subcontinent. But as we all know, even the greatest empires can't last forever. After reaching that incredible peak, the massive Mughal Empire started to, well, fray at the edges. And this created a power vacuum, an opening for new forces to rise up, both from inside India and from across the ocean. See, after Aurangzeb, whose massive military campaigns kind of stretched the empire to its limits, the central government in Delhi started to get really weak. Now, this wasn't an overnight collapse. It was more like a slow, gradual crumbling. And as the center got weaker, powerful regional kingdoms saw their chance. The Marathas, the Sikhs, the Kingdom of Mysore, they all started flexing their muscles and carving out their own territories. India was becoming a patchwork of competing powers. And this really shows you the dynamic perfectly. It's like a seesaw, right? As Mughal power goes down, something else is rising up to fill that void, the British East India Company. They started out as just a trading corporation, but they brilliantly used all this political chaos to make their move, playing different sides against each other with their own private army and, tons of money. The real turning point, the moment everything changed, was in 1757, the Battle of Plassey. This was the absolute game changer. By winning this battle and gaining control over the super wealthy region of Bengal, the East India Company went from being just one of the players to the dominant force. This is really the moment the colonial chapter of our story begins. But of course, colonial rule eventually creates its own opposition. So the next phase of our story isn't about an old empire dying. It's about a new national spirit waking up and starting to fight for its own freedom. About a century after Plassey, all this simmering anger just exploded in the revolt of 1857. Now, while the rebellion was eventually put down, it was a massive shock to the British system. It was so big, in fact, that it caused the end of the East India Company's rule and forced the British government, the Crown itself, to step in and take direct control of India. And that's where we get this famous term, the British Raj. Raj is just the Hindi word for rule. So this period from 1858 all the way to 1947 is the era of formal, direct colonial government by Great Britain. In response to this direct rule, the freedom struggle got much more organized, much more strategic. It wasn't just one big push, it was a series of campaigns that grew bigger and bigger over time. Under leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, millions of people were mobilized for things like the non-cooperation movement, the civil disobedience movement, which included the famous Salt March, and finally the ultimate demand, the Quit India movement. And at the very heart of this whole strategy was Gandhi's powerful idea of satyagraha, which you can translate as truth force. The idea was totally revolutionary. It wasn't about defeating your enemy with violence. It was about using nonviolent resistance, patience, and moral clarity to make your opponent realize they're in the wrong. It was an approach to political struggle that would inspire movements all over the world. So after decades and decades of struggle, the moment finally came. But the birth of modern India was a story of both incredible triumph and just profound tragedy. On August 15, 1947, it happened. The long struggle was over, and India was independent. Nearly 2 centuries of British rule had come to an end. It was a truly monumental achievement, celebrated by millions who had fought and sacrificed and dreamed of this very day. But that independence came at a staggering price. The decision was made to partition British India into 2 separate nations, and it triggered one of the largest and most violent migrations in human history. Just look at that number. Over 15 million people were displaced. It's almost impossible to comprehend the scale of the human suffering involved. And this was the result of that division. The map of the subcontinent was literally redrawn. It was split into 2 brand new countries: India, which was founded as a secular, democratic republic for people of all faiths, and Pakistan, which was created specifically to be a homeland for the region's Muslim population. So independence was achieved, but the story isn't over. Now comes the final chapter of our 500-year journey, the unbelievably massive task of building a modern nation and figuring out its place on the world stage. Those first few decades were all about tackling these huge challenges. I mean, they had to forge a single nation out of hundreds of different provinces and old princely states. They adopted one of the world's longest and most detailed democratic constitutions in 1950. Under their first prime minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, they pushed for industrialization, they battled food shortages with the Green Revolution, and they somehow managed to get through wars and all sorts of political crises to hold the new country together. And then came another major turning point, but this one was economic. The economic reforms of 1991 were a total watershed moment. By opening up its heavily state-controlled economy, India basically unleashed decades of rapid growth. You can see it right here on the chart. This didn't just change things at home. It plugged India directly into the global economy and transformed it into one of the fastest-growing major economies in the world. This economic explosion, which was really powered by a world-class IT sector, combined with its growing military and diplomatic strength, has completely repositioned India. It's now seen as a major rising global power in the 21st century. It's a pretty incredible transformation from where this story began. Which brings us right up to today. From the height of the Mughal Empire, through the trials of colonialism, the struggle for freedom, and its emergence as a modern republic, it's been an epic 500-year journey. And the critical question that all of this history leaves us with is, what's next? What will India's next chapter look like?